I wanted to make a video of commentary on Milo Yiannopoulos because why not? Like I used to have this aversion to doing things that other people were doing, just because other people were doing them. So, like for instance, I've never seen the film Titanic, and I've never seen any Star Wars film, and I don't have really any intention to see Titanic or any of those Star Wars films through to this day, quite frankly. But I don't have that same conceptual aversion, like I don't have to be this eternal nonconformist anymore. So everyone's talking about Milo Yiannopoulos and this pederasty thing or whatever. So why not? Why not make a little snippet about it? To be clear, um, I would describe myself as a Milo Yiannopoulos fan for sure. I enjoy listening to him. I enjoy following him and seeing his career trajectory. And again, I'm not the sort of person that's going to be like, oh, I need to abandon Milo now. Nor do I feel the need to cape for Milo. I don't think that I don't see any problem with the way things are playing out for him right now. I think that it's probably cool. But I wanted to. Some people think that because I like Milo, like I agree with everything that he says. There are some things that he says that I agree with for sure. I think he's got some really valid critiques of contemporary feminism and contemporary social justice warriorism. I think that really, to me, as someone who has identified with those labels, who has even in the past, like a decade ago, would refer to myself in that way, as a social justice warrior before the term became pejorative. Um, I like the critique that he offers people who are still operating or who are operating in the current iteration of that, which I think has changed quite a bit. And I think that if you look at some of these protests, like there's that video circulating that I really like about, there's a bunch of people in a campus library having some sort of protest about, identity-based protest. And then you have the little dude who was a foreign student. He was an Asian student. I don't know what, it doesn't say what country he's from, but he has a heavy accent, so it's clear that he's not American. And he says, it's quite simply, this is library. This is a library. What are you doing? Like, why are you protesting imperialism in a library? I'm over here trying to study and get my grades. That's my critique of the current social justice warrior campus left. It's like, okay, yeah, of course, a lot of your stances are good. These are productive messages for society, but what are you really doing by protesting your fellow students as they're studying? You know what I'm saying? Like you should be studying too, really. I mean, not to be like a finger waving granny, but like you're probably going to make more change if you do these step by step now to get where you need to be in the future, so that you can infiltrate into some of these things and change them, or deconstruct them, whatever. So, and I stayed with Milo. I did not agree with the way that the Berkeley protesters handled his presence there. I thought it was a bit. Not only was it overkill, but it did sort of fuel this machine whereby he was appearing all over national news. It did increase his book sales. It only kind of like increased his power and his authority, his exposure, if you will. And increased identification with him to a degree, because it played precisely into his narrative that the left had become the purveyors of violence. If you listen to Yvette Filarca and the BAM group, the By Any Means Necessary, they are the ones who are speaking violence. If you actually listen to Milo and even some other organizations that are adopting stances that are in and of themselves that we find very reprehensible, and I think very rightfully so. Nevertheless, even those groups that are adopting those stances are not advocating violence, but Yvette Filarca is. So like I do think that's another critique of the left that we should take to heart and say, who actually is radicalizing, who actually is trying to stimulate this trajectory toward a potential civil war, which a lot of people are speculating is very possible. Um, So I think, like you don't, if it's all one big chess game in some people's heads, is the left really ready to be the ones who tip it in that direction, who tip it toward violence? I don't think that's wise. Um, and I think that, as I said, as far as a moral left, a morally centered leftist movement who wants to oppose someone like Milo, to me, your better bet is to just hold a counter event. Hold a counter event that's better, that's more popular, and even do the same thing, like film it, put it on YouTube, make it more flashy. Like out market him basically. Is I think the way that you should more appropriately go about it, because when you play into his narrative, you're helping people of that ilk recruit among their ranks and swell their ranks. You're not making your position look like the stronger position. You're not making your side look like the saner side, quite frankly. I've listened to Yvette Falarka. She's not making her side look sane. She is looking like someone who wants to be in a mode of violence. She looks like, I'll just say it very frankly, high narcissism, egomania, martyr complex, wanting to purvey violence for the aesthetics of her own self creation. Ha! Libraries open, dear. But anyway, so progressing, bringing back to Milo, there are some things to consider about when you look at feminist conclusions and social justice warrior left conclusions, identity-based conclusions. It's not that I'm telling people that their conclusions are wrong. There are conclusions that I agree with and ones that I disagree with. What I'm saying is that Milo did a really good service to the left if you want to really go back and kind of look at where he has had an edge over his detractors. Um, in terms of poking holes and showing where the holes already were, and showing people that if you get so far insulated within a worldview where everyone around you agrees with you, you become really lazy intellectually. And I recently saw a podcast with three conservative women, two of them, Brittany Pettibone and Tara McCarthy. It was their show. It was their live stream show, and they had a guest, and I forgot the young lady's name. But she's a very intelligent person, but another pretty blonde. Not Tom of the Tommy Lahren ilk. Tommy Lahren is to me just Fox News Junior. Like she's adopting that aesthetic and also the soundbite methodology. This is someone who isn't doing that. So I'll find the podcast and link it to this. Because these were all intelligent women, women I don't agree with on everything. But one thing I did agree with is that as conservative women in these highly liberalized environments, they've had to do their homework. They've had to go in deeper and do their research and have their facts and their statistics at the ready in terms of why do they believe what they believe. So that's something that the left needs. I think the left needs to question themselves. Like don't just take as granted that you're right. Like go deeper into it. Go deeper into intrapersonal intelligence, which is the knowledge of self, and find out why you believe what you believe, and also bring it to the external as well. So what evidence do you find in the world that justifies what you believe and why you believe it? Because, for instance, we have this idea. Milo challenged the idea of rape culture, and there are reasons to say that rape culture as a concept has maybe gone beyond, has gone too possibly too far. And I'm not adopting that stance. I'm not saying that it has. What I'm saying is when you counter his critiques with something that's less substantive than what he's saying. And that's saying something because Milo is not a substantive person, in terms of his, I mean, he's very minimal. He does have substance. He does present journalistic evidence. He does present real world evidence, but it's not to the level of deep critique. You know what I mean? So it's really saying something if you're less substantive than Milo. That's what I'm saying. But when you are less substantive with Milo, in terms of debate, in terms of the art of debate, where the purpose is to attract more people to your view, you lose. And it's like he said on Bill Maher: if you don't show up, you lose. You lose the debate. I made a Facebook post about just looking at Larry Wilmore and the other gentleman, Mr. Nance, who just completely sunned him, you know. And some people question whether or not their facts were all the way straight. It doesn't really matter. They showed up and they came off as more substantive. They came off as more confident, and therefore they won. They won the debate. So what I'm saying is Milo on these campus tours has generally speaking been winning the debates against the people who come to him with their statements, because they come to him with very predictable statements, and they also invariably appear less confident in their opinions than him, because it's like they're more kind of like emotionally aroused, and they come off as more desperate and grabbing, which is the same way that Milo came off on Bill Maher when he was confronted by people who were not intimidated by him. So, so that's, you know, the left. I've been watching Milo, and I've been a fan of him and his method of provocation. You know, I've been a fan of him, seeing him as a performance artist and as a provocateur, and saying this is someone who's teaching people who agree with a lot of what I agree with how to be better. You know, by being that negative, clownish. Antithesis, that enemy of sorts. So Milo, you know, whatever. Moving on to what's going on with this pedophilia, pederasty type thing. I have been aware that he had adopted these types of opinions or had given voice to these types of opinions before. I think I had come across the Joe Rogan clip. I think he's like very sort of cheekily alluded to them on his campus tour and that kind of thing as well. I guess I was less moved by them or less destabilized or offended because it's not that his opinion is terribly uncommon, you know, quite frankly. And I made the point with someone who commented on a thread that I made about really about his Bill Maher appearance actually. Someone had added the video before the news story became like this huge thing, and before he lost the book deal and all that. Someone had added that link to that video onto my thread, and I looked at it and I listened to his views, you know, with greater attention than what I had before on that topic. And what I responded to that person was that you know, there are many countries in Europe where the age of consent is 14. So yeah, he was pushing it even further and saying, yes, there are sexually developed 13-year-olds who should be regarded as able to consent to sex. And again, he wasn't speaking in totalizing narratives. You know, like the way in which people are talking about him have been more reduced and less, you know, like less complex than the way that he was talking about it himself. But yeah, he was pushing it further to age 13. But again, like he's operating in this sort of context where, well, obviously he was having sex that he feels was consensual at a very young age with people who were of age of majority. But also he again, within the European context, you know, the average age of consent in a European nation is between 14 and 16. So it's a different sort of dynamic than what we have in the United States. And I made the point that, you know, we should not necessarily discount the possibility that whatever sort of education system that they have in Europe, or whatever type, whatever cultural predilections toward communication, there may be other ways in which people in those age categories are treated more so as adults. And I don't have knowledge of this. I'm not saying that there is such a thing, that what I'm saying is true. I'm just saying it could be true. But generally speaking, I don't think that, you know, what has happened obviously is that this was a targeted strategic thing. I think these people, the people who decided to release all this, I think they were sitting on it until a certain point. I think they deliberately waited until after the Bill Maher performance, because that was kind of like a, you know, a plateau, like a peak, if you will, of his notoriety and his media exposure, that kind of thing. So you know, the attack kind of came at precisely the moment that would have been best for it to come, because that would be, they guaranteed the most repetition, the most reposts, that kind of thing, based on, you know, Milo already being in the public eye post the Berkeley protests, post all that media coverage, and post the Bill Maher appearance. So this was something that was used to sort of neutralize him. I don't see it as a negative thing that these people have done it. I mean, I don't. I think it's fair game. Let me say that people have done this. I think it's karmically correct with Milo because there are ways in which he was playing the game of ill-gotten gain. And what I mean by that is that yes, he has done certain things that I think are culturally productive, and that, like I said, he's presented a real challenge to reductive elements of the left, and I think he's also empowered and emboldened people on the right who are well-meaning, who are not violent. And I'm not saying they're all well-meaning and all not violent, but I think that there are a lot of people. If you look at his audiences, these aren't like extremists. You know what I mean? Like these are just kind of like generally timid conservative kids who maybe needed to be a little bit empowered and able to bring their perspectives to the table in a more in bolder ways, you know, in more confident ways. I think that that's, you know, the core virtue that he's provided. You know, he said it's okay to be yourselves. It's okay to stand up and adopt your perspectives, even if your professors tell you that it's not. And so this is a good type of thing. But the way it becomes ill-gotten gain is that he has been playing to reductive ideas. He has been deliberately incendiary without being fully truthful. Like he had that one presentation, like, why do lesbians commit so many fake hate crimes? You know, well, okay, Milo. Yeah, and he did present like an hour's worth of evidence of all these individual instances in which lesbians have committed fake hate crimes. You know, yes, he made a case of sorts for this idea that lesbians commit fake hate crimes. But I mean, does it need to be explained? Like that's obviously a reduced and unfair assertion that was designed to be as offensive as possible, to get as many clicks as possible, and to get as much attention as possible. You know, like because of course you can always take these isolated incidents and present them as a pattern. You know, whether they're a real pattern or not. You know, I know many, 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 many lesbians who've never committed a fake hate crime. You know, in fact, I don't know any lesbians who have committed a fake hate crime. So he was already playing the game of ill-gotten gain. So, like I said, he all these words that he said were words that he said. You know, so he gave them the fodder for his own undoing, and obviously didn't sort of keep track with his own career, such as to say, okay, well, this is what's going to be used to neutralize me later. You know, he wasn't playing that level of that game. So, like I said, I think this is kind of like karmically appropriate for him. You know, obviously, you know, he had mainstreaming opinions due to CPAC, due to the CPAC cancellation. I think that those are less of an option for him now. But I think the way in which he was trying to mainstream was to adopt himself as a voice of the alt-right, and a huge swaths of the alt-right, based on my researches, reject him as a legitimate leader of themselves. So it's kind of like he was trying to create this perception of this enormous base, and then use that as a justification for him becoming increasingly mainstream. And, you know, probably he's mentioned wanting like a morning show and things like that. You know, that's really what he's wanted, you know, some kind of like easy job, like morning show thing where he can be himself in these AM hours and get paid a lot of money for a big network show. You know, so I think that's kind of like where he was trying to take it. And I think that certain options like that are no longer available to him. The other end of the ill-gotten gain argument, to me, is that so a lot of us queens who are on the left have kind of read him for his projection of fabulosity. You know, like he's kind of made it cool to be conservative again by being this subversive queer figure and being outlandish in his style and that kind of thing. Those of us on the left are like, you're not fabulous. Like your style is not there. You know what I mean? Like you're sort of like taking these kids who don't have a lot of open flamboyant gays amongst their ranks, and therefore don't have the same style sensibility, and taking advantage of that fact because you don't really have a strong sense of style yourself. And so being that person, you know, it's kind of like unfair for you to act like you're this like guru about something that you're really not, you know. So like it's like I told somebody else, a good friend of mine who is gay. I was like, his approach is conceptual. You know, he's cheeky and he's conceptual and he's very like left brain about it. You know, like he'll do like a costume on the Bill Maher show. He had pearls on because he's always referencing pearl clutching. But you know, fashion is a right brain function. Let me just make it clear. Let me just break that down for anyone who's confused about that. You know, style it either lands or it doesn't, and it lands or it doesn't based on emotional intelligence, not IQ. It's EQ, not IQ. You know what I mean? And so he was stylish and flamboyant and ostentatious from a left brain like IQ standpoint, and it was always very conceptual. But reduced even in the concept, you know, like to be truly fabulous, you can have a concept, you should have a concept, and that's ideal. You know, the sublimation of fashion is concept plus effect, you know, pulling it off. But he never ever pulled it off. Let's be real about that. And so like that's more of the ill-gotten gain. It's like you're not really as cool as you're pretending to be. You know, you're not really as fashionable or stylish or hashtag everything. You know, like it's like it's kind of like it's almost like he's even said now that he's not necessarily conservative. It's almost like he knows he's not stylish enough to play to the left, so he's like, oh, I'll just go play to these right wing kids and I'll get by. You know what I mean? That's how I see it. So there was, strong elements of that ill-gotten gain. So like now that this has come back around, I see this as very karmically appropriate for Milo. Like I think he kind of needed his train to be sort of like stopped for a while. I do think that he will continue to have a career. Who knows if Breitbart will fire him or not? I guess we'll find out possibly by the end of the week, like which way that's going to go. But I think it's okay for him to have this stop. I do think that like this isn't the end of his career, but I think it's a line. So I think his career on this side looks this type of way, and his career on this side looks this type of way. And what I would say about that is that if he's going to continue to have a career, I do think he's very intelligent. I do think he's very capable of himself going in deeper and finding more substantive ways of expressing himself that aren't the same level of incendiary, that aren't really designed just for the sheer shock value and the clickbait-y value. You know, like I think he's capable of expressing himself in a more intelligent and considered way. And I think that that's definitely what he should do. Going back to the pederasty thing, you know, like yes, of course, he's pushing the envelope. If you take as base or as given that 14 to 16 is what's considered normal as an age of consent in Europe, he still pushed it. You know, he still pushed it to 13. I've also made the argument. I don't think that translates culturally. You know, I think within America, I think a good age of consent is 16. I know some states even have sort of laws that speak to the age gap, and I think that's probably a very good thing too. So I don't want anyone to mistake me saying, you know, being somewhat detached and somewhat neutral on Milo's statements themselves as an endorsement of that opinion. You know, I think 13 is too young to consent, especially within the strictures of our culture, for sure. But you know, there is a debate there to be had about what is the age of consent. You know, like what if someone is sexually developed, you know, when should we have that line? And especially when you talk about people who are within a certain age range, you know, like, you know, say like 2 to 4 years of each other, and it's all around that 18-year pivot point, which isn't the age in every state, but it is the age here in Virginia, in my state. You know, like there are definitely ways in which we should consider what those laws ought to be in light of a different sort of frame of thinking. But certainly, what Milo's opinion, I as well find to be incorrect, and understand why many people who view it as central to their being and their mission view it as egregious and reprehensible. I will say though, just to keep the left 100. Those of you who are criticizing Milo, who obviously is a survivor of child-adult sexual relations, those of you who are so quick to jump on him, you know, I'm not hearing the same level of critique directed at Lena Dunham, you know, who molested her younger sister, and I'm hearing a complete aversion to the idea that this whole Pizzagate thing should even be investigated. I think, and I'm not a Pizzagate truther by any means. I've looked into it and there are patterns there that are weird that really correspond to data collected by law enforcement regarding covert pedophilia operations. I mean, Pizzagate is a legitimate thing that should be investigated. So again, everyone needs to be more morally consistent. Like a lot of people who are jumping on Milo on this and acting very righteous in that statement really should consider to what degree are you just playing the team, playing favorites, playing the lines of your team. If you are just doing that, if you don't have a critique of Lena Dunham, if you don't have a critique of, or if you're not saying that Pizzagate deserves an investigation, but Milo deserves to have his career neutralized because he's made a statement that says, yes, I'm a survivor of this, and yes, it's okay, yes, I consented. What's the nature of your values, really? But again, not trying to be a jerk there. I'm just saying. So that's the fullness of my opinion. There you go. I did something. I participated in a mimetic discourse. Ciao.